So this is our naming compounds talk. And when we have ionic compounds, that's the metal-non-metal combination, the naming step is super easy. You write the name of the metal. What's Ca? Don't all speak up at once. Wait, something's in the chat. Not copper. Copper is a Cu. Yeah, calcium is Ca. That's right, Jose. So we've got name the metal ion, calcium. That's it. That's like step number 1. Step number 2, write the non-metal. Br is the coolest non-metal. I'll give you a fist bump all day, every day, because it's bromide. So it's just calcium, bromide. And when we do the last thing in any 2-element compound, we give it an "ide" at the end. So we're not saying calcium bromine, we're saying calcium bromide. That's it. So like learning what all the names are is the only hard part, but you got access to periodic tables. So do you remember what Na is? You can also answer no to that. You don't have to like look it up to find it. It is a fair thing to say you don't remember what any of these letters are. So we've got sodium, and F is the stuff that's for your teeth. Fluoride. The reason it's MgO instead of OMg is we always put the metals first, but Mg is magnesium. And what's the stuff you want to breathe out of the air? Yeah, oxygen, so we change it to oxide. See, I can't keep the chat up while you guys are, in here. So like actually use your voice, speak up, let me hear it. Yeah. Sr is strontium, and Cl
Strontium chloride?
Yeah, strontium chloride. And it sounds the same. Like this seems like salt, and sodium fluoride is a type of salt. Actually, all of these are types of salt, chemically speaking. But salt isn't on the list. Lithium, that's our battery stuff. And the S is sulfur, so it's lithium sulfide. This stuff is part of what leaves the crustiness on all of our pipes in Tucson. We have so much calcium in the water, and it mixes with oxygen and makes a calcium oxide deposit. And K is from Mr. Fleming's bad date joke. If you ask somebody out and they say potassium, that's good. More bad jokes are coming. And I is iodide. So these guys are all super easy. You just name the first thing and you do the second thing with an iod on it. There are, sometimes we'll get like NH4 or SO4. We have these things that show up in brackets. Those are called polyatomic ions. And when you run into them at first, it's a little concerning, but you can get lists of polyatomic ions. And so we will have some of the commonly used ones. They don't have an ide sound. they have, instead of IDE, it could be ITE or ATE, depending on which ones they are. And NH4 is ammonium, and that's, you know, what we put in Windex. But you still get the ion name, and if it's the ending thing, it has the "ide," unless it's one of these fancy ones, like this is calcium, and the SO4 group we call sulfate. And magnesium and the NO3 group, that there are two of here, is called nitrate. Nitrate's the kind of stuff that we put in like bacon. You guys like bacon? If you like bacon or sausages, we put things that are nitrates and nitrites in them, and it's an NO3 or NO2 grouping because it keeps it fresh for longer. And here's sodium, and OH is hydroxide, hydrogen, oxygen, hydroxide, and sodium hydroxide is drain cleaner. And we'll just skip through all of the extra work because, yeah, the polyatomic ions have some weird names. My personal favorite of all is MnO4 is permanganate. It's fun to say. You guys should just try like potassium permanganate. And somebody just asked me in chat, when do you know to use the different endings? And it's when you have these weird polyatomic ion things like this SO4. That way, like when it's more than just one element, because this is barium here, that's oxygen there, barium oxide is easy. As soon as I've got this, let's see, I have to move the chat box out of the way. Well, the permanganate, that's 1, 2, 3 things are in it. I know it's going to have one of the weird sounding names to it. It's not the best rule to have, but it's a pretty easy one to work with, is like more elements and the name gets goofier. And if you remember the crisscross thing that we did to find out the charges, you can, you know, do it one way. You can also do it the other way, but this crisscross is, you know, what we ended up doing a lot. And you can see where we get the ide and the ate. There is a relationship between the names. It takes a while to explain. Now, I'm just going to skip ahead to the last idea that we have because it's going to take a little bit more. And we already did this on the last test. So when we have covalent compounds, these are non-metal and non-metal, they are going to be named differently. So our non-metals sharing electrons, they're the guys way up in the right-hand corner. And we call those bonds molecules. Now, knowing the difference, because it's going to let you know how to do the names, is relatively simple. Covalent compounds only contain non-metals, and that is something worth jotting down, that they only contain non-metals. Where ionic compounds contain a metal and a non-metal. So you'll get one from the left-hand side and then one from the right-hand side on an ionic compound. So we have all of this and this, all of those are metals. And then, you know, the non-metals are the ones over on the right. So if we look at it, CO2 is going to be both non-metals. So we have covalent. Nitrogen is a non-metal, so is oxygen, so that's also covalent. Now PT, you'd have to search on the periodic table to find PT. It'd take you a while, but that is a metal and oxygen is non-metal. Hg is mercury. Is mercury a metal or a non-metal?
It's a metal.
Yeah, it's a metal. It's the liquid metal. It's kind of cool. So that makes it ionic. Silicon, that's a tricky one. Is it metal or not? I see somebody shaking their head there. So yeah, it's covalent.
Non-metal.
And then strontium. Strontium's another one that we would just have to look for. And strontium is a metal. So if it has a metal, it's ionic. If it's ionic, the name is super easy. Now with covalent compounds, we're going to talk about the sharing, but hydrogen is a little bit of both. It can be a metal or a non-metal because it's so small and so easy, like fundamentally speaking, there's not much going on. So it exhibits properties of both. If it had more protons, it would be like definitely one or definitely the other. So hydrogen can be positive ion, negative ion, and it can share. And hydrogen floating around in hydrogen gas form is sharing electrons with itself. Now, when we've got 7 things that are diatomic, this is like hydrogen, and the other diatomic molecules are all nonmetals, but they make a funny shape. It's a number 7 plus hydrogen over there. So you can kind of remember that there's 7 diatomic molecules in that corner group, and hydrogen making a 7 plus 1 kind of shape. And they just bond with themselves. So you'll find O2 floating around, N2 is nitrogen, and then fluorine, iodine, all of the guys down the right-hand side. Now, covalent compounds, because they can share, they can get a bunch of different shapes. They'll have a lot of different rule naming conventions. So we're going to talk about the easiest type of covalent compound to name right now, which is binary, which means that it has 2 elements in it. Binary means 2. Binary covalent compounds are between 2 nonmetals, and all these things that look like jumpy castle toys are different representations of binary covalent compounds. Now, because they can share their electrons in so many different ways, there's a lot of different things that we can do. So we can have carbon and oxygen being CO or CO2. Nitrogen and oxygen make a bunch of different nitrous oxide sort of things, and knowing the difference will let you know what you should put in your car and what your dentist should give you. Not knowing the difference with your dentist is dangerous. I'm not sure if it's dangerous with your mechanic. So we are using the name to explain the ratio in the name, which is kind of interesting. So we're going to use prefixes. These are going to look familiar to many of you. Mono means 1, di means 2, tri means 3. You guys ever heard of a tricycle? It has 3 wheels. You know, that's pretty easy. Tetra is the Siamese fighting fish. They have 4 lobe fins. Penta, like pentagon. Hexa, like hexagon. Like this all starts sounding like geometry class. Octagon, like a stop sign. And some of them, like hepta and nona, we don't use a lot normally, so remembering what they are takes a little work. But if we have N2O4, I am going to write the nonmetal, which is nitrogen, and then oxygen, but I'm doing an "ide" on the end. So it's a nitrogen oxide. But since it's N2, it's dinitrogen, and O4 is tetroxide. The prefixes are only if there's just 2 things. So it's an easy rule to learn. We never use mono on the first one because we'd be here all day saying mono, 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 mono. So CO2 is just carbon dioxide and not monocarbon dioxide. And with an oxide, we don't do an O or an A because it would be weird if it was like monooxide. It's just monoxide. Like monooxide, monooxide. So for all the oxides, it's monoxide, dioxide, trioxide. Instead of tetraoxide, it's just tetroxide. So you really di and tri are normal with oxygen, and everything else we just take out the extraneous letter for it. Octaoxide would sound really funny, actually. But we normally would get a list of all of these that you guys could practice writing it out. Instead, you could practice saying it. What's CO2? Somebody hit me. No, seriously, like, you can say it. You can write it down.
Carbon dioxide?
Yeah, carbon dioxide. Super easy. C is carbon, S is sulfur. What's CS2? Yeah, so we've got that disulfide. Abney dropped into the chat, so it's carbon disulfide. The P is a phosphorus and Br is bromide. So since there's 3, that becomes a phosphorus tribromide, which is chemically quite different from phosphorus pentabromide. And we're going to get more practice with this. Don't worry about it. But kind of seeing how these work out, and like, it's a bunch of nutty words to begin with. I totally get that. But we're going to work on it, and we're going to hopefully get through it. So this is going to be part of your Apex stuff this week also. And I will make, you know, just some little easy kind of quiz level stuff, because there's only one right answer and there's no need to talk about it. So I'll have that coming up at the beginning of next week. So we're going to work on some stuff in class this week, but then expect like a little low stakes quiz sort of thing next Tuesday.